You're listening to Story Struck. I'm Rachel, an editor and writing coach.
And I'm Nino, a ghostwriter and book coach. Welcome to our curious community where we dive into everything books and writing.
Now, let's get into the episode.
On today's episode, we're going to be talking about overthinking, overcoming overthinking, to be precise. So, Rachel, you're a Virgo. Tell us about what it's like to overthink.
To overthink is literally every moment of every day of my life. So I overthink every aspect of, like I said, anything. When it comes to my writing and editing, I overthink the whole process. So, like right now, like where I kind of start the overthinking mode is in the ideation phase. So I've been thinking about writing my first book, and I feel like it's a little bit easier for me to do this sometimes for other people. I still overthink, but not as much. I'm overthinking a lot more with my own things. So when I was thinking about the idea for my book, I was like, okay, well, I think that this is going to be a series. Okay, yes, I know this is going to be a series. So instead of just plotting out my one book, I should plot out like multiple books in my series. And then, okay, now let me build this whole elaborate backstory world and know every nuance and detail. And then, okay, wait, they say you should start marketing your book when you start writing your book. So, okay, before I start writing my book, all right, let me also think about my marketing plan and about this and how I want to do that and how I want to appear and da 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 da. And so it's just, an analysis paralysis of just all of the things. And so I'm, like, getting all this information, but I'm not actually doing anything with it. It's
Yeah. Well,
what
and I think overthinking is very rooted in fear because it's those, but what if this happens? But what if people don't like this? But what if I fuck this up? But what if, and so we get into that analysis paralysis that's all rooted in this tornado of fear. And then we can't get out of it and we get writer's block. Right? Because then our body
Yeah.
just says, just like shuts down and we're just like, nope, no more ideas, too overwhelming. And so that overcoming the overthinking is one of the greatest feats I think a writer can accomplish because it's a whole thing. And when I was younger and growing up and stuff, I feel like overthinking was just where I lived. And looking at it from an astrological thing, I feel like us air signs, well, not even us air signs, us mercurial signs, especially. You're a Gemini, you're a Virgo, I'm a Gemini, we're both ruled by Mercury. And so, like, us mercurial signs have that kind of innate overthinking, but then also, like, with a lot of air in your chart, like, overthinking can be a thing. I have a client who has an Aquarius stellium, and it's just like overthinking is just like her whole bag. So, um, so yeah, it's been a journey to try and figure out how to overcome that. And for me, the solution that I have found is using spiritual tools and going through a process of like channeling my stories. And that is how I have overcome that. Because like with a lot of that overthinking comes a lot of self-doubt. Right.
Mhm.
And that's that self-doubt is, of course rooted in fear, but that self-doubt stops you from even trying things. And when you are approaching it with certain techniques, like I do with the spiritual tools and stuff, it helps you kind of like bypass that self-doubt because it's like, well, if so and so angel or if my whatever or if the universe or is telling me to do this, like I trust it, I'm going to go with it. And then you go with it because it's like takes a little bit of the pressure off you. You know what I mean? So have you I know we've talked about tarot and stuff with like story crafting and stuff, but have you ever other than like with me used anything to use a spiritual tool to like bypass the overthinking with like a decision with your books or anything?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting, like you said, it's easier to trust, like, from an external source. And so, like, I've been reading tarot and doing spiritual work for like 20 years now. So, I kind of have learned to trust that gut intuition, and times when I haven't trusted that, like, I'm like, "Son of a bee, I should have trusted it." Like, I knew, and I just was like, "No, analytical brain says you should do this." So, it's been interesting now, like, trying to apply that to the writing process, to the creative process, instead of, helping it to work through, like, personal life decisions and things like that. And after chatting with you, I was like, okay, well, let me use that as a creativity tool. So, like, if I'm getting kind of stuck or hung up, I will, like, I love tarot cards because of all the archetypes, things like that. So, I tend to use those a little bit more than like oracle cards and things like that. So, I might pull that for my plotting and be like, okay, I'm going to pull this, these cards, and they're each going to represent an act or a chapter or something like that. And that kind of gets my brain going, and it like gives me permission to get out of analytical brain and into creative brain. But something else that you have had me do, and I have had so many aha moments when I'm like been thinking about a character or something like that. You're like, talk to your character. Just sit and meditate with your character or talk with your character. So I will try and get out of analytical mode, and I will go out and go for a walk. And I will just be like, "Hey," and I'm gonna talk to this character. And literally, as I haven't even finished that thought yet, and my character's like talking to me and like telling me all of this stuff. And it's like, "Hey, well, blah, 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 blah." I'm like, slow down. And then that's when I get out like the voice notes app, and like I'm just talking into it, like as I'm just kind of letting these freeform thoughts flow. And it's just really interesting to step out of it and approach it from a different perspective. And so, like, those little things have been so helpful to break out. And I think for me too is changing up my location. I think this is something I want to touch on later, but I am neurospicy, like have high functioning autism. So I get very structured in my routines and regimen. And that also plays into overthinking and overanalyzing and obsessing. So, like, I have a spot where I like to do my plotting, a spot in the house where I like to do my writing, a spot where I like to do my editing. So, like, I get in that spot and that's where my brain goes. So I have found it helpful for me to disrupt that regimented routine of I'm in planning spot, but I want to be creative, but nope, I'm here. This is planning spot. So, kind of creating that other routine to break through that has been helpful, at least for me personally, and how my brain works.
Yeah, and with to go back to like the channeling your characters. In my opinion, I see stories as like if you think of like these other dimensions in space, and so it's like you have all of these strings that are all knotted up together in space, right? And so you're pulling the thread of that story, and it's just like you're channeling it from another realm or another dimension or something like that. And so whenever so in a sense, like the energy of that character exists in the cosmos. So then you're able to tap into them and just ask them, right? Just like, hey, Cassie, so what do you think of this dude here? Like, what's your thoughts? What's your opinion? Tell me your story, right? And, we can look at it the same way with like, I was thinking about an example for us, my recent like social media series that I'm working on that is just like, what if you want to write your grandmother's story? Say your grandmother did some epic shit in her life and you want to write her story because she never wrote a memoir about her experiences or whatever, but she's dead. And you have no other information other than a few little stories that she told you. So you can't write her memoir. So what if you write a fiction story based on her life? You have these little tidbits, and then what if you just do some like channeling with her, right? And then just fill in those gaps and create a fiction narrative around her life story and the stuff that you channel. And it doesn't matter if it's not real or not, because that's the thing I think people get hung up on is they go overthinking mode on the spiritual shit. It doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter if your grandmother is really channeling with you or not. It doesn't matter if the stories are in a big bundle of knots up above your head. It doesn't matter because the fact is the tool, the thought experiment of it helps you to bypass your logical mind and tap into a more intuitive flow or a subconscious whatever of your writing craft. So that I went on a journey of. But I think when it comes to being stuck, especially in those moments of like, what would my character do now? Like, what should happen next and stuff like that? Ask them. One of the things that I did when I was like in those moments during writing my Loki novel was I got my dowsing rods out. And so I was like trying to determine in the book whether who was going to be his ally on the inside. So he needed somebody on the inside that was supporting him, feeding him information in order to help him journey throughout the book. And I'm like, well, who is that going to be? And I'm like, maybe it's Tyr. Maybe it's him. He feels bad about the stuff that happened with Fenrir and stuff. And if you know Norse mythology, then you know what I'm referencing. If not, just go with it. And I got my dowsing rods out because I was really conflicted about it. And I got my dowsing rods out. I'm like, should Tyr be your ally, Loki? And it's like, no. It was a very adamant, like, fuck that guy. I'm like, okay. So we're going down another option. So instead of sitting there for another 20 minutes going back and forth in my mind, should it be Tier? Should it be this one? Should it be who? It was very clear because I used the dowsing rods just to just like ask the question. It helps you bypass stuff.
And I think too, like giving yourself that permission to play and to be wrong and have that be okay and not feel like I've invested so much time and energy in this thing. I have to do it this way if it doesn't fit. So, like, I gave a talk at a summit a couple months ago where I was talking about test driving ideas and kind of like iterating fast to play with things to see how does this feel. And so, like, being willing to kind of test drive like you did with the dowsing rods or like playing a what if game, right? So if I'm not sure, like if my character's gonna um be in this cozy mystery space or if she's gonna be in this, fantasy space, because I was torn between, writing in multiple genres. And so I took the overanalyzation route of like mapping both things out where I could have done it a little bit more simple and just kind of played with it and maybe given myself a time frame of play with this idea for a day, then play with that idea for a day and kind of see what you're feeling. And then from there, just pick one and then move forward with it. And you can always change your mind down the road. But if you aren't in it and doing it and experiencing it, you might not know if that works. And so for me, that's kind of like the spot where I am. I'm like, all right, well, I have these two really, really cool ideas that could be awesome, awesome series. And I'm just keep over analyzing where like you're like, just pick one. You can do both this and this, but you have to just pick one and move forward with it. And I think that can be really hard for people because we feel like we're giving up on something. And so I think we need to play with that mindset piece of, I'm not giving up on that. I can still do that. It still exists. It's here, but I need to follow this right now. And the thing that I'm doing now doesn't have to be the thing. It is just a thing. And that's something that I've been working on in my head. This is a thing, not the thing. I have to give myself permission and gentleness to myself.
I mean, being neurospicy is like there's different, I mean, for different spices, there's different hurdles. So
Yeah.
for me, it's the all or nothing time blindness that
Yeah.
aspect of all. So, it's just like, but I can't do this if I'm doing this because like everything in my reality exists around here. Right. So I, like was working on my Loki novel. I finished it up and I'm in editing for it. And then I have the rest of the series to go, which was originally going to be a second book and now it's going to be two more books. But at the time, I'm like, but I have to write the next book for it. But I had this other story that was just so loud and so clear in my head. And so I'm like, well, fuck, I don't know what to do. So I'm editing my Loki book while I started writing this fairy book. And the Loki book is more of an epic fantasy, whereas the fairy book is a cozy fantasy. So they're different realms and stuff. And so I'm like, okay, crap. And then I had more information come in about the Loki series, and I'm like, oh, it's supposed to be 3 books, not two. So now I have two more books that I gotta plan while I'm working on these other things. And so it's like, wait, now I have to do all the things at the same time. And that's where like the ADHD overwhelm happens because it's either it happens now or it happens never in my head, right? It's all or nothing.
Mhm.
And so it's like, okay, no, we can follow the dopamine. If today Loki's feeling more on point, then we work with Loki. If today the fairies are feeling more on point, then we work with the fairies. And we can do like, sure, the process of finishing the fairy book might take a while, or because I'm working on these other things, but like allowing for that fluidity, allowing for that, it helps to move you forward still while staying in a creative state. It's quite a dance, and it's different. Like, I don't know who it was on the podcast. It's just like there somewhere, somewhere in my head, someone is saying, I don't know if it was a podcast or I heard it somewhere else, but it's like there's as many different writing processes as there are writers.
Mhm.
And just because one person has this tip or that tip doesn't mean that that's the end all be all. Like just because I'm saying go get your dowsing rods out or your pendulum and ask the gods what you should do or whatever, that doesn't mean that that's going to work for you. Actually, turns out pendulums or dowsing rods don't work for everybody. My mom cannot get it to move for shit. But it's the trial and error of it, right? It's like, okay, let's try new things instead of it being like, well, I tried the thing that Anne Lamott said and it didn't work, so I must not be meant for writing, and then just giving up. Which been there, done that. And it doesn't it's not great.
Yes, I believe that was Troy Lambert. If you guys haven't listened to his episode yet, please go back and listen to that. He is just so much fun. And that episode was wonderful. We talked about, the power of writing short stories, but also a bunch of other things, including, what it takes to, really be a full time writer as a career. And then also touching on different like writing styles and things like that. So that was great. So, yeah, you brought up so many excellent points there. And now my brain in overanalyzing mode is thinking about all the things we just talked about and trying to collect its thoughts again. Do. Dowsing rods, trying different things. I think that that's important too, right? Is being willing to try something different. Like how you were like, just talk with your character and see what they want. And I'm like, okay. And then as soon as I gave myself permission to do that, it was like, whoa. And then the book kind of, started to come through. And that's what brought me back to the other thing. There we go. So when you were saying kind of like the you can like the all or nothing thinking and stuff like that, that made me kind of go back to where I started to write my book a few years ago. And then I became in overanalyzing mode and so hyper focused on this has to be an author career and I have to like go all in that it killed the joy of writing for me. And so I stopped writing my book. And now that I'm circling back to it, like was feeling that external pressure, that overanalyzing mind of, okay, full time writing career, author career, we got to go all in with all of this. And then I started to lose a little bit of joy from my writing again. So I decided I needed to step back from that. And like when you were telling me you can do both, and I'm like, okay, but that's going to take infinitely longer. And I'm like, well, what's so wrong about that? What is so wrong about that? And so that just kind of gave me a new perspective on it and thinking, I'm going to write for joy. I'm going to write for me. I'm not writing to market. That, like, if there's no joy in it, then why do it? And I think that
Yes.
conversation with Troy also got me thinking about that, where, you know what, my writing can be for me, and my writing doesn't have to be my full time income because you know what? I don't want to hustle that hard to have my books, at least this point in my life, be my full-time job. because I've done that before with other creative ventures where I'm like, "All right, well, I love this. I'm gonna turn this into a job," and then I didn't love it anymore. It took everything away. So I'm giving myself now permission to take it slow and do it at my pace and not a pace that somebody else dictates it should be done at, and that is making me feel so much calmer about the writing process, and I feel like that is helping to slow my brain down a little bit because now I don't have that external time pressure of, like, laser focus burning myself out.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing with overthinking is there's all of these rules that play in our heads. And these rules are influenced by like society, by industry, by familial training or whatever. It's and so we have all these different rules going at the same time and some of them conflict. And then we have our own feelings in the mix and it creates that tornado. And so it's like okay, what is true? And hustle culture
Oh,
has
yeah.
really and I mean, even if you read some books from some writers who are writers like in the 70s and stuff, like before writing became such a I don't know, an industry. Like I feel like it really just like became this whole like corporate businessy kind of industry. And before it was just like, oh yeah, I wrote this nice thing and I make a nice living off this nice thing and I just write and then everyone else does the same. It wasn't as intense as it is now. And now you hear authors who are like, oh yeah, I got turned down by all these publishers because I don't have a big enough platform and da da da. And like there's all this fucking drama with it. And it sucks the life out of writing because, in my personal opinion, although I'm not wrong, is that writing is spellcraft. Writing is a way of creating a whole new world, planting a seed of change in minds and stuff. And in order to make your magic with your book, you have to be in a space of joy and freedom because in witchcraft, like that is those are the spells that work the best. The ones where you're having fun, where you're just like, yes, this is the thing, and you're feeling it, you're feeling yourself, you're feeling the intention, you're feeling the transformation. Those are the things that work. You can follow a book and be like, well, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and it's not fucking working because you're not having fun with it. You're too serious about it. And writing is the same thing. There's a reason it's called a craft, right? Spellcraft, writing craft, same thing. You're just you have to be in this space of joy and freedom in order to make something that's truly impactful because when you overthink it, I have a great example of this. I don't know if you've seen this show, and I think I mentioned it to you once before. I'm a chaos goblin today. It's eclipse season. As of the recording, it's eclipse season. So I don't know if you've seen the show, but it's called Dickinson. It's Haley Steinfeld stars in it, and in it she meets this author, and she's like in awe. She's like, "Wait, you're an author and you're a woman? Whoa!" And so this author is going through and she's all stressed and she's like leaning at the dinner table and she's like, what if there's a story about this? And she goes and she explains Little Women. She's like, who's going to want to buy a book about three teenage girls? And then she goes on and later in the episode, she's like, what if there's this book? And then she goes and explains Moby Dick. And she's like, no, no, no. Who's going to care about a man who's chasing a whale? Right. So she thinks about this wonderful, brilliant idea that we all know was popping off and then she overthinks her way out of the idea because she's thinking too much of what's going to sell, what are people going to read, what are people going to care about, what are they going to think about it and stuff. And so then that gets her out of the creative space. In order to be in the creative flow, you got to stop thinking about other people and what you should be doing because fuck your shoulds. Do what you feel called to do right from your heart, not from your mind.
Yes. And, like, when you were talking about, like, the witchcraft, spellcraft, that instantly made me think about that is what the flow state is when you're writing. You are just
Mhm.
in that moment, like, stuff is just going. That's why we call it flow. And I feel like that flow state and then, that state when, we're doing spellcraft, we are out of, like, the conscious analytical mind, and we're tapping into, like, our subconscious, and we're tapping into that universal energy, and I know you feel the same way that that is what's happening when you're writing, you're in that other side of the brain, so it makes me think of the activity that we did. Was it neurotropic art? Is that what it was
Yeah,
called? Okay, so yes,
neurographic art,
neurographic
neurographic art.
art. There we go, neurographic art, and if you guys haven't tried that before, take a look at it. It's really fun, and from, like, a psychology perspective, I think it's great because it, like, gets your brain out of it and tapping into, like, kind of connecting the right and left brain so that you're both going, "Oh, there you go. Yes."
This is my
Oh,
example of the neurographic art that we did because Rachel and I do this thing called arts and witchcraft, and so we combine art with something witchy. And so I painted this with like watercolors and moon water, and this is what I came up with for it.
that is awesome. Mine, I think, is in the closet over there. And mine too. I tapped in and I did it, and it's like so not my colors I normally do. And it was really fun because I was just like, I'm going to be free willing. I'm not going to overthink. Although I did way too many lines and then like I kind of went a little insane. So, but I just was like, just go. Randomly, I'm picking colors. I'm not going to be thinking. And it was just a fun, creative activity. It got the right and left brain kind of, working, in sync and tapping into it. So, like, doing things like that can be great creative exercises, even when you're not writing. Like, not all creativity has to feed directly into your writing. And if you're feeling burnt out on the writing, maybe you need to explore something else. Give yourself that mental break because then that is freeing up the mind to get back into that writing space. So I know, like, for myself, I do experience like those like shutdowns, those burnout moments. And if I try to push forward, I'm just gonna be like, nope, I don't like it. I'm done. Nope, 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 nope. So that's when I
Yeah.
need to do something else. And so, like, as you guys can see, I got lots of fiber arts equipment over here. I have my little kitty couch I crocheted. So in those times, I will take that step back and I will do some other type of creative exercise. And that's where my mind does a reset and I'm able to go back with a fresh perspective into what I'm doing. And I just find that incredibly helpful. And I just kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I feel like
No,
that's
but I think it
overthinking.
really applies because that's actually, I think, who was it? Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way. That's one of her tips for writer's block is to go and have an artist date. Do something that sparks inspiration. Do something that allows you to get into a different state of mind because you have to you have to leave the tornado to get out of you can't stay in the tornado to stop the tornado. You have to leave the tornado and go do something else so the tornado can dissipate and then you can come back to what you were doing. And so I think also, talking back or referring back to Troy's episode, like writing short stories. I think sometimes that is a really really great exercise, especially if you're wanting to learn how to tap into the flow or like the channeling of writing, like I was talking about earlier, because it's short, you get that dopamine hit of completing it, and you get to practice that experience in a way that doesn't have a lot of pressure on it. You don't have to write a whole last book, right? So you don't have this pressure of repeating it every single time or repeating it for every single chapter of finding the flow state and just allowing yourself to kind of channel the story and stuff like some authors, a lot of authors will talk about like it feels like, or a lot of artists in general, I think it's an art thing, we'll talk about like the art is moving through them. Like they're just the conduit for the art. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with like channeling your writing. You're the conduit for the story, for whatever's happening in it. And so the doing that or practicing that experience with short story is a great way to start practicing getting into that flow state and tapping into that energy, so that way when you are ready for that novel, you're able to just flow with it so much more. And then you have to go and let go of that, well, we have to have it perfect right away, and you can like embrace the shitty first draft of it all and stuff. And then you just get it out, and then you can fix it. Then you can change things if needed, and you can, polish it up and stuff. For that first moment, and you let it flow, and to start that process, I think for me the process started, or that um, was with poetry. That's what got me to get into that state. But I did write a short story that gave me that kind of experience of like the story coming through me. And then right after that, right after I did that short story, I did it in October, and October was the month that I really like went full force into my Loki novel, and I wrote 50,000 words by between like October and December. It works. It works. It's practice.
So, and then hearing you talk about, the artist state, artist way, and all of those things, it makes me think of, as writers, that maybe we need to take a page out of the book of artists. Artists keep sketchbooks. And sketchbooks are a spot where you can experiment, you can be messy. It's not about perfection, it's just about practicing. And I feel like writing short stories or flash fiction, whatever you want to call, however small you're writing, that could be like your sketchbook. That's your
Mhm.
creative play area, right? Where you can just go out and get a notebook, and then that's your writing sketchbook. And that's the spot where you can try on different writing styles, writing voices. You can have a conversation back and forth with your, so I know when we were in your writers community, someone was talking about, we got like off talking about morning pages, all of these things, and they said that they would have two different color pens, and in one color pen they would write as themselves and write something out, and then they would be tapping into like either their future self or their guide or whoever they wanted to, and write in the other color pen. So I think that that could be really fun to do that with your characters. So
Yeah.
you as the writer, right? You write in one color, you can be like, Cassie, you know, what the heck were you thinking in this scene? And then I'll grab the other color and have like, well, this guy was following me, so obviously I thought he was a crazy stalker dude, and that's why I like spun around and whacked him with my knitting bag. I didn't realize that it was, Sheriff blah blah blah. And, then my stuff went tumbling on the floor, including my tarot cards, and he gave me this weird look. So, and that I just came up with that in my mind right now, channeling Cassie here, right? So I think that could be really fun. And now I want to do that. I want to have my writer sketchbook. And then also, if you guys want to learn how to do like flash fiction or something like that, I'm thinking about putting together a course on it. So, put a comment down below, shoot me an email. I don't really check social very often. So the best way is to email me, Rachel at bookboundjourney.com, or author Rachel Claire at gmail.com. Wait, did I say that right? Rachel at bookboundjourney.com. There you go. Or author Rachel Claire at gmail.com. Those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
I really love that idea of like having that Q&A sesh with the different colored pens with
Yeah.
your characters. That is such a great idea, and I love the idea of having a, like, writer's sketchbook. So this is what I have. This is my magical chaos journal, and I was, like, coming in to, like, be ready for this call and stuff, and I'm like, "Wait, I need to bring my journal for some reason," and I'm just like, "Well, this is why, because I needed to show you my magical chaos journal, and this
So
has
pretty.
just it's just chaos. It doesn't have any like rhyme or reason. I do my daily journaling. I write ideas for stories. I did like social media planning in it recently. It doesn't matter. This is just it's small. Shout out to Peter Papa Press, the best journal publisher ever created. It's my favorite publisher for journals. And it's small enough to even fit in like my little fanny pack thing that I have. And it's beautiful. It's got this nice little like strap to hold my pen to. Anyways, I love journals so much. I'm a journal connoisseur, but having this with me at all times. And then I get an idea and I'm like, oh my God, I got to write it down. And then I have a place where I can exercise that little bit of chaos. Um, that idea of it just being like, "Oh, let's just go here and just, like, write this story," right? Like the, retreat I was telling you about
Yeah.
that I wanna design and just have it be like, "Okay, we're gonna go to this one sacred site." Like, I have my big one that I'm planning, my trip to Ireland next year, in June, so if you wanna come on retreat with me, be sure to, check out my Ireland retreat. But I had this idea, like, what if we go to one of the fairy mounds? There in Ireland, and we just spend a day just channeling stories, like working on some short stories, working on some writing exercises and stuff in a space that's just like associated with fairies, right? That's so highly energized. There's one in particular that is like more ancient than the pyramids, more ancient than Stonehenge, and like think about the energy around that space. And so if you're working with the energy and you're writing from this space, what kind of magic are you going to create in your stories, right? And so you can have those moments just like day-to-day life. You're walking around and you just think about something and you just sit down for a second and you just write a paragraph of this person. And how many people have like done a short story and it's turned into a book? I've heard several authors talk about that. We're like, oh yeah, well this was actually originally a short story, but I think it was Elizabeth Gilbert. She's like, this was originally a short story that I submitted in this magazine, and then a publisher said, could you make this a book? And she wrote her whole first novel or whatever based on this short story. It can spark things, and that's what you have to do whenever you're in overthinking mode. It's about that spark that changes things.
Yes, I think The Martian started that way too, as a short story or a
Mm.
collection of short stories. And then your chaos journal that made me think the way you described it as, I believe it's called like a commonplace journal or a commonplace diary. And they would just write anything, like if there was a quote or a passage that they heard or something like that, they would write it down in their thoughts, all of that stuff. So that is what that made me think of. So I know that we are coming up on time because we have another
Yeah.
awesome guest to interview. So I hope that everybody had fun today hearing about all of these different ways to overcome overthinking. And maybe you'll give one of them a try. If you have something else that you do to overcome the overthinking, definitely put a comment here, send us a message, connect with us on social. We would love to hear what you guys are doing.
Yes, please. I do respond to messages and I'm on social frequently. You can message me if you like to use social for your communications and stuff. Let us know what other tips you have, or what you took away from this. If you want anything more like this, tell us all the things. So until next time. Thank you for listening. Check out the show notes for details and links from the episode. And don't forget to subscribe and follow for more. Special thanks to our composer, Micah Silverstein. Enjoy the rest of the music.